Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Random and today I'm going to be reading the fanfiction Alternate Perspectives from the Fallen Star series written by Boxmaker. This is a Hermitcraft SMP fanfiction with a rating of mature, and the creator chose not to use any archive warnings, though personally I'd put in graphic depictions of violence for a few scenes. The category for this fic is general, and the featured characters are Etho-slab, Vintage Beef, BOO, Dog M77, Good Times with Scar, Cubfan135, Iscal85, and other original characters. There are no romantic relationships, but the featured platonic relationships are Etho-slab and Vintage Beef, BOO, Etho-slab and Vintage Beef, Cubfan135, and Good Times with Scar. The additional tags are superpowers, alternate universe superheroes/superpowers, injury, blood and injury, hijinks and shenanigans, drinking, heist, hurt comfort, non-consensual body modification, Etho-centric, oops, I gave him trauma, kidnapping, medical torture, needles. Don't worry, he'll be mostly okay in the long run. These tags make it seem dark, but I promise this is lighthearted. The summary is in the description, and now on to the story. Chapter 9. Preparations, Punches, and Progress. The week flew by in a blur. Etho was constantly busy with balancing his classes, homework, heist preparations, and getting his powers under control. He had a little success thus far. Every night he tumbled into bed, exhausted, and then got up early the next day. Scar seemed open to the idea of Beef being in communication with him and promised Etho he would try to get his hands on some maps of the building. Etho dodged questions about how his powers were coming along, telling Scar that he had it handled. He didn't. Cub hadn't warmed up to him much at all, but he did take some measurements of Etho, just in case. He wasn't sure he wanted to know what Cub was planning. Etho was in a coffee shop, catching up on some overdue homework, slumped over his laptop and half asleep, when he was jolted awake by someone thumping down in the seat across from him. Startled, he rubbed his eyes and adjusted his mask. "Hi, I didn't wake you, did I?" Pearl asked as she dropped her bag onto the table. "No, you're good. I was just catching up on some stuff," he replied, shutting his laptop. He was glad to hang out with Pearl for a while. He needed a break from everything else. "I have to show you something. It's been a crazy morning," she gushed, pulling out her phone. Intrigued, Etho leaned in. "I was out for a walk this morning. Take a look at what I saw," she said, facing the phone towards Etho. He was met with a slightly blurry photo of someone who was unmistakably the Vigilante 77. He perched on top of a building, looking at something in the distance. "Wow," Etho breathed as she wiped through a few similar photos. "You saw him in person?" "Yep. Isn't that super cool? I wish I had my actual camera on me. I could have gotten a way better shot." "Oh, that's cool. No one's ever seen him super close before. What was he doing up there?" "Beats me, but he ran off pretty quick. I think he was looking at something, but I didn't see what." "I wonder what he's up to," Etho mused. "Knowing 77? Probably no good. I can't believe no one's managed to put a stop to him yet," she replied. They ordered coffee and chatted for a little while. Pearl talked about her photography class, and Etho complained about math and explained the project he had to work on. He neatly managed to avoid bringing up all the other activities that had been eating up so much of his time. "Oh, I almost forgot," Pearl said, checking her watch. "I've got to go to my self-defense class. My friend Jem is going to be an instructor soon, and she wants to practice teaching on someone." "Really? That's cool." "Yeah, you can come along if you want." He was about to politely decline, but he thought about it for a moment. In just a few days, he was planning to break into a hitman's office and steal a bunch of important documents. He didn't plan on getting into any altercations, but maybe it would be useful to at least know how to effectively dodge a punch if he had to. I'll come along. They only had to walk a few blocks before they reached the gym. Pearl clearly knew her way around as she led them into a back room, which was an open space with a large mat on the floor. A red-haired woman, presumably Gem, was stretching in the center. "Hey, Pearl," she said cheerfully, giving them a wave. "Hey, this is Etho. I brought him along because he was curious and I know you want to practice teaching. I hope that's all right." "That's great," Gem said happily. "Nice to meet you. I'm gonna lead Pearl through some of the stuff we've been working on, but after, I'd be happy to teach you some of the basics." Etho agreed and spent the next half hour watching as Gem guided Pearl through escaping various grasps and chokeholds. He realized they were both quite strong and was no longer looking forward to whatever Gem had planned for him. It was too early in the morning to get his ass kicked. They finished and Pearl thumped down on the bench next to him, wiping the sweat off her face. "Don't be nervous," she said, taking in Etho's wary expression. "You're just starting out. She'll go easy on you." Etho felt slightly nauseous as he joined Gem on the mat. To his relief, she spent the first few minutes explaining how to be aware of his surroundings, diffusing a situation and informing him that running, if possible, was always better than fighting. "But," she continued, "sometimes you get caught in a situation that you can't avoid, and that's where self-defense comes in. Hold out your arm. Is it alright if I touch you?" He nodded, and she held his arm firmly before explaining a few techniques he could use to break free. By the time he had to go, he was thoroughly exhausted, but had managed to break free of several of the holds Gem had taught him. "Feel free to come back any time," Gem called as they left. "You're not focusing," Scar scolded. "I am focusing," Etho replied, frustrated. He and B-Dubs hadn't had any luck on figuring out his powers, so Scar decided to take a crack at instructing him. His vision had only shifted to third person once during the course of the week while he was walking to class. He had miraculously managed to reach his destination unharmed before it returned to normal. "You need to be intentional," Scar explained for what was probably the third time. "You want to use your powers, so direct your body in doing so." "I'm trying. It's not working," he replied, eyes squeezed shut in concentration. "Outside of me charming you into using your power, I don't know what to tell you." "Would that work?" "Probably, but you can't rely on me to help you with your abilities. I'm not going to be with you during the heist." "You could just call me or something," Etho muttered half-heartedly. It was a poor solution, but he was grasping at straws by now. "I can't charm you over the phone, and even if I could, I wouldn't. You need to learn how to gain control yourself." "I'll try again, then," Etho muttered. Needless to say, his time with Scar didn't go very well. "I'm on 10th and Rose right now. Can you still hear me?" Etho said, holding down the button on the handheld radio. "Loud and clear," Beef replied cheerfully from the other end. Etho adjusted the earbud in his ear and continued. They had begun testing the range on the radio so they could figure out how far they could go and still be able to hear one another. Etho wondered at Beef's discretion, stopping at every intersection so Beef could mark it down on the map at home. So far, they seemed to be able to cover a range up to 50 blocks, further if there weren't any buildings in the way. Their apartment would be too far away from Iskal's building to reach, so Beef would have to relocate elsewhere. Scar had insisted that B-Dubs be the one to drive Etho to Iskal's apartment, since Scar couldn't drive and he insisted that Cub wasn't allowed behind the wheel unless they had a death wish. They agreed that Beef could sit with B-Dubs in the car and direct Etho from there. Beef had privately begged Etho to get them a cool van with fancy setup in the back, but Etho didn't want to push their luck, and figured a van would be too suspicious anyways. Realistically, Beef would be right outside of the building, so their radios didn't actually have to reach a very far distance, but they were both having a good time, so Etho continued to wander the city at Beef's whim. "You suck at this," Etho claimed as another ping-pong ball hit the ground. "You're cheating," B-Dub snapped back with a grin on his face. Wise game master, Etho said towards Beef. What's your verdict? Beef looked up from the maps of Iskal's building that Scar had just given him. The three of them had commandeered one of the Concorp break rooms in an effort to get some productive planning done. It had quickly devolved into a heated ping-pong match between Etho and B-dubs. Beef shrugged. If he's cheating, I can't prove it. It's the same way with rank toss, man. I don't know how you're so good at it. The game continues. You have 27 points, B-dubs complained. I've only got 6. There were a few downsides to studying computer science. No, he couldn't fix your Wi-Fi. Did you try turning it off and back on? That didn't work? Trash the whole router. It was probably broken anyways. And don't even get him started on printers. Those things were like the haunted houses of the computing world. It's printing random pages on its own. Get rid of the damn thing. It's possessed. In his opinion, however, the benefits vastly outweighed the downsides. Etho cackled as he compiled the application and ran it on his desktop. A folder with an unnamed text file appeared on his desktop. A few minutes later, another appeared, then another. He opened each file to confirm that the contents were what he wanted them to be. He grinned as he read through the files, each sporting a single line of random characters, an incredibly rude phrase, or a ridiculous anime quote. It was finally working flawlessly. He adjusted the time between file creation to make it much longer and more sporadic, and checked everything over one last time. He compiled it over to a flash drive and held the tiny device in his hand. The devious part was that the application was hidden within a dummy photo that would execute silently upon being opened. The second Iskal plugged the flash drive and clicked onto anything, the application would copy itself to his desktop silently and run automatically. That was the hope anyways. Etho had tested it as much as possible and it should work, provided that Iskal was foolish enough to plug in a random USB device that he thought was his own. He tucked the USB drive into his pocket for safekeeping. Messing with Iskal wasn't strictly necessary, but if Etho was going to break in, he might as well have some fun with it. It was freezing outside, but the view made it absolutely worth it. 2 nights before the heist, Etho, Beef, and B-dubs had climbed up the fire escape on the outside of the building and were now sitting on the roof, legs hanging over the edge. It was entirely illegal, but people did it all the time, so they would probably be fine. Etho shivered and wrapped his arms tighter around his chest. Half of B-dubs' moss jacket was across his back, and Beef's arm was wrapped around him for warmth. He was huddled between the two of them as they watched cars scrawl by like ants below. He was content. The three of them had spent a lot of time together that week, and although he was exhausted, he wouldn't change it for the world. Etho tilted his head back to gaze up at the stars, but there wasn't a single one to be seen due to the light pollution. It's a shame we can't see the stars, B-dubs said wistfully, watching Etho as he looked at the sky. Have you seen them before? Etho asked. B-dubs smiled sadly as he tilted his head skyward. We're old friends, he whispered back. Etho was a bit too cold to unpack the meaning of that. We should go see them, Beef said. When this is all over, the three of us should find a nice open field somewhere and sleep under the stars. Etho hummed in agreement. I like sleep, B-dubs agreed. Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't dozed off, Etho teased, poking him in the ribs. Well, I would have, but someone has half my jacket, he replied with a pointed look at Etho. It's cold, he pouted miserably. He leaned back as Beef pulled out the pair of binoculars Scar had given them in the box. They had finally managed to adjust them to the point where they were actually useful. Anyone up for another round? Beef asked, referring to their game of guessing the car that would next exit the parking garage. Beef had a solid lead, probably because he knew more car models than the other two combined. No thanks, Etho muttered, looking up at the sky once more. I'll play, B-dubs announced. The next car will be purple. Purple? Purple. Etho tuned them out and enjoyed the moment of solitude. He was going to be breaking into Iskal's building in less than 48 hours, and the thought was already making him nauseous. He still hadn't managed to get his powers under control, and at this point he was starting to lose hope that he ever would. The stars winked at him. No, because there weren't any stars. Where are the stars? The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. A distinct feeling of wrongness and dread filled him. He tore his gaze away from the dark sky, heart pounding in his chest. No, it wasn't wrong. It was just the pollution. The stars were still there, even though he couldn't see them. The stars were still there, even though he couldn't see them. They were still there. It reminded him of what B-Dub said a few days ago about being able to control his breathing, even if he wasn't conscious of it. The stars were the same way, he thought. They were still there, even though he couldn't see them. The thought calmed him, but he still felt somewhat on edge. He would have thought fretting over not being able to see the stars was silly, if not for the overwhelming sense of wrongness it produced. He was being stupid, of course. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen a sky full of stars. Had he ever seen them at all? He could picture them clear as day, so he must have seen them at some point. It was the only logical answer. Etho had seen the stars before. Deep down, Etho knew that he had never, ever seen a sky full of stars in his life. He gazed, slack-jawed, into the open sky, and his vision snapped into third person, so he was watching himself look at the sky. A tear ran down his face, but he was too absorbed in the sky full of nothing to give it much thought. Etho? Etho! He jerked back to reality as Beef called his name. He blinked and forced his vision back to normal. Etho stared blankly in Beef's direction before he realized what he had done. He snapped his vision back into third person without a second thought. It was easier than breathing. Etho grinned as he returned his vision back to normal. I've got it. So that was weird. I wonder what's up with that. I mean, freaking out because the stars aren't there? I don't know, man. That's weird. Don't ask about the stars. Just don't ask about the stars. It's going to turn into such a mess about the stars. Okay, so you have a notion. The current working theory about the stars is that they are representations of beings from another reality that are entering into this reality, which is a dream, and that's how they show up. But that they're dying, or they're being disconnected from this dream, but they need it to survive in their reality outside the dream, because somehow that makes sense, because there's something to do with that, and I still don't know how to explain this, because I don't know, okay? I don't know. Box likes to make me suffer, okay? They like making me suffer. Changing the topic. Etho finally got control of his powers. Yes! I suppose that's what B-Dubs meant when he said you have to accept that you can control them. I wonder what Doc was doing up in that building. I don't know. He was just doing his things. Probably observing Alphatech. Or like Iscal. Or like, I don't know, someone being evil. That computer virus. I forgot about the computer virus. I like Pearl and Gem just having a fight club. And it's not a fight club, it's a self-defense class, but I don't care. And Gem being a fighting instructor. She is good at PvP. It makes sense. I like it. I love it. We need more girls content in this fandom, okay? I have too much focus on boys. We need more girls. Anyways, to the credits. Because we're there now. The fanart used in this video is mine, actually. I don't want to make a habit of that, but I don't know. I just felt like it was an important moment. And I know that it's inaccurate, okay? I know that I filled the sky with stars because the stars are pretty and I like the stars. I like it. It's an important moment. And I couldn't find anyone who did that. So I made my own fan art and I'm gonna use it in my video. I don't want to make a habit of that, but anyways. This story wasn't written by me. And some of the sound effects aren't mine. Some are. You can find the proper credits for those in the description. I get all my sound effects from freesound.com, or I make them myself. And that's it, I guess. I hope you enjoyed listening to this chapter, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.